The streets of Mandalore were bustling. Peace and prosperity reigned under the current Mandalore. All remnants of Death Watch had been dismantled. Only the warrior clans Ren, Vizsla, Rook, Eldar, Kryze, and the Protectors remained as the governing body of Mandalore. It was a strange time of peace that Mandalore had not experienced for centuries. Under the leadership of Bo-Katan, many splinter cells of Death Watch had risen and fallen amidst the looming tyranny of the Empire and the First Order. Bo-Katan had united the people once again under one banner after the Great Purge had separated the great warrior clans into covenants all those years ago. Helmets could be worn proudly and taken off without fear of persecution. As the Sundari adjourned, Bo-Katan remained motionless atop the throne. Sen Rao approached the throne and knelt.
Mando. What news of the galactic democracy?
Bo-Katan questioned.
Home channels are silent.
Rao answered.
Business as usual then.
Bo-Katan stood up and began pacing in front of a window overlooking the city.
Have you felt it too?
Rao looked up at Bo-Katan.
I have. This peace, its foundation, will soon be tested.
Bo-Katan ran her fingers across her chin in contemplation.
What should I do?
Rao begged for a chance to act.
Be discreet. I want all the warrior clan leaders to be prepared for an upheaval.
Bo-Katan sighed.
As you desire.
Rao stood up and bowed. Bo-Katan remained still, scanning the city out to the horizon line. This feeling inside of her pulsated and expanded, a feeling of dread that accompanies the calm before a storm. She knew that eventually this time of peace would be threatened, not by outside invaders or insurgents, but by something very ancient.
I wish you were here, sister. I don't know how you did it. As a warrior, I do this for our people. And the peace of Mandalore must persist. It must not fail.
Bo-Katan stood upright, hands clasped behind her waist. As she closed her eyes in contemplation, memories of her sister during the Clone Wars ebbed within her mind. She recalled countless congregations where Satine had spent days, months, even years proselytizing her idyllic vision of a peaceful Mandalore. Long gone were the days of warmongering and warrior clans occupying street corners in exhortation when it came to any notion of peace or life without the thrill of battle. There was a time when the mere thought was caustic to Bo-Katan, when all that mattered to her was serving House Vizsla and leading the Night Owls. It was all but ancient history now. Rey and Finn disembarked the Falcon. Scanning the surrounding area and across the vanishing plains, Rey searched for markers of old Jedi temples. "What are we looking for?" Finn asked.
Spires, stones, anything that looks Jedi.
Got it. Anything that looks Jedi. Finn's eyes roamed the vast grassland littered with small dunes and outcropped stone formations. He got lost in the landscape's sprawling beauty. Chewie walked down the ramp and barked to Finn. "Oh, sorry, Chewie," Finn exclaimed as he moved aside. Chewie was carrying a small pack of sundries to make camp for the night. R2 strolled off the ship and beep-booped to Rey. Rey focused on a pack of Lothwolves that rode the horizon line, paying close attention to the leader of the pack demarcated by a pristine white coat. The white Lothwolf scurried to a stop and turned attention to Rey. Their eyes met. "What are those?" Finn asked. Chewie barked in response to Finn. "Lothwolves." Finn waved his arms in the air, confused. "Lothal. Wolves. Lothwolves. Doesn't get any simpler than that." Rey stared at the white Lothwolf for what seemed like an eternity in her head. The Force wasn't particularly strong on Lothal, but the concentration was still very much abundant.
Dude.
Rey whispered. "What's that now?" Finn questioned. Rey began to move in the direction of the Lothwolf as it bolted off into the distance. "Rey?" Finn started to follow. "Hey, wait!"
Follow me, Finn.
She shouted as she began to move at a steady sprint. Chewie barked as they both left the campsite. R2 beep-booped in befuddlement and expressed this by strolling in circles.
We've all felt it, Rao.
Sabine remarked. Rao paced back and forth.
What do we make of it? Could it be Clan Jarrett, the one that we keep hearing about in the Outer Rim territories?
Tristan asked while looking at a holomap. Sabine walked up to study the holomap as well.
No. This is something
bigger.
Have you heard anything from them?
Rao posed to Sabine.
Nothing. Silence for months now.
Sabine responded in deep thought, hovering over the map.
But they don't normally communicate unless they need to.
Rao walked towards the entrance.
I'll meet with Eldar and Rook and see if I can glean any more information about this.
Wait, Zen,
Sabine pleaded, eyes still fixated on the map.
look here.
Rao hurried over to the map console. Sabine pointed at Concordia, Mandalore's moon.
Something wrong.
Rao asked. Sabine zoomed in on Concordia.
Why aren't the transponders for the mining facility on Concordia transmitting anymore?
Rao studied the map again.
That's strange. Ever since we reopened the facility, it has been our primary source of Beskar ingots.
Rao moved slightly, interrupted by Sabine's hand.
I'll go.
Sabine looked at Rao.
Clan Ren are the stewards of Concordia now. You meet up with Eldar and Rook and inform them of what's going on.
As you will.
Sen Rao walked off in haste.
Tristan, prep my ship.
Sabine ordered.
You got it, sis.
Rey and Finn had been chasing the pack of Lothwolves until the sun had set on the grassy plains, with only the moon shimmering across the landscape. They had arrived at a rupture in the earth beneath their feet. It was dimly lit by the moon, and they could not see any further down.
Let's go.
Rey said to Finn. Wait, how deep does it... Rey interrupted Finn by jumping through the fissure. And there she goes. Okay, Finn, let's just go. Finn readied himself, fully prepared to embrace what awaited him below. He had often done this, psyching himself up before a big leap of faith. Finn braced himself until suddenly he was pulled into the crevice and began floating down to the bottom. As his feet touched the ground, his eyes met Rey's. Thanks. Finn dropped his face towards the ground.
Let's go.
Rey ignited her gold lightsaber and illuminated their path, revealing a winding corridor taking them deeper and deeper into the earth. Is this the Lothwolf's den? Finn questioned, following Rey close behind.
No.
Rey scanned each point of ingress and egress as she lugged her feet carefully over a jagged ground surface. Their footing had to be precise and calculated. The path forward was steep and scraggy. One misstep could mean death for them both. They traveled a few hundred yards into the barbed rocky path to a clearing flooded by water and an island in the center. And this is pretty ominous, Finn described as he remembered this wasn't his first foray into a cavern.
Follow me.
Rey took Finn's hand. They arrived at the central island in front of a stone lectern demarcated by ancient carvings and markings. There was a familiar engraving in this lectern.
It's the symbol of the Jedi.
Rey explained to Finn. The force is dense in here. It's almost suffocating. Finn was short of breath.
Sit down.
Rey sat cross-legged as Finn mimicked her.
Close your eyes. Listen.
Finn closed his eyes, holding Rey's hands, and cleared his mind, and allowed the force to penetrate his thoughts. The air was still, the sounds of the sedentary waters muffled. Finn's focus was primarily on the force. He could hear a sharp but faint trill, but he could not pinpoint its origin. Rey looked upon Finn as he sat focused, meditative. She smiled as she felt the familiar calling. The trill quickly turned to a high-pitched thrum. Finn's facial muscles twitched as he tried to make sense of the melody. Eyes closed, Finn sprang up and sprinted off into a deep corridor out of Rey's sight. He arrived at a small clearing with several platforms scattered about the arena. The trill in his ears would not subside, and it pulsed ever so strongly the closer he got to pinpointing its origin. But there was no way but up. Finn began scaling the first platform, hand over hand, foot over foot. As he reached the top, he scanned his surroundings and knew instantly that he would have to find a way to the next platform. He studied every platform meticulously and began mapping out a route in his mind. To the second platform, he had used a force pull to retrieve a dangling vine. Vine in hand, Finn had propelled himself up. A sharp tinge scored his temples as two enormous pillars began to close in on him. He tried to force push them both, but they would not yield. And then he saw it. He used a rudimentary type of force augment on his feet as he began jump-stepping off the two pillars as they continued to close in on him, gaining altitude with each hop step. The pillars were almost immediately closed in, and his time was running out. He would be squished between them if he did not make it. As the pillars closed, he had finished scaling the pillars and used its height to jump to the next platform. There were no more platforms to be found, and his quarry stood just meters away across a gaping chasm. He stood there, confounded, until he glanced upon writings etched on the platform, underneath his feet. He brushed away the dust and crumble and revealed a pattern. Finn recognized what he at first thought was chicken scratch. These runes could be found in Luke's scriptures describing the Virgin Scatter, or as Luke described, the Nether of Unbeing. Luke goes on to detail this place as a world between realities that connected all the living force through the cosmic force. Luke had momentarily gained access to this world through a gateway long destroyed by time. He had written some of these ancient runes present in this world down and managed to create a partial lexicon. It was now Finn's job to recall these runes. It was futile, he thought, to try and translate these ancient glyphs on the spot. He focused on runes he recognized. Little by little, he had uncovered part of the inscribing where only a few remain unknown to him. He knew at this point that his knowledge of the glyphs was not enough. The message was still as obscured and confusing to him. But he recalled another annotation Luke had left in that passage. Look within, as well as without. Finn closed his eyes. He hovered his hand over the message and began to feel the trail he had been hearing become clearer and omnipresent. The force flowed through him. His eyes shot open. A test of courage. Finn looked into the gaping chasm. Walk the Jedi path. Brilliant, he thought to himself. He knew this was what Rey warned him about when he had first started selecting saber parts, that completing the lightsaber would be his biggest challenge yet. Okay, Finn, you can do this. He mustered the strength to take one giant step of faith into the shadow beneath as a floating stepping stone rose quickly to meet his foot. He began to calm. As he took another step, another stepping stone reassured his path. One after another, his path to the final platform revealed itself. Finn arrived at the final pedestal where a lone Jedi symbol remained. The trill had increased to a loud buzzing that reverberated in his temples. But as ever-present as the sound was, it was no longer invasive. It was calming to him. Finn allowed himself to be in the moment, stretching out with his feelings, as an amorphous voice filled his senses.
Tell me, why must you become Jedi?
With his eyes closed still, Finn responded, I want to protect my friends. Something terrible's coming.
You sense or you fear?
I'm afraid. I feel like... Finn hesitated. And I just know I need the power to stop it.
Power you seek?
Yes.
And this is why you must be Jedi?
No. Finn stumbled on his words again. He shook himself off in pursuit of clarity. I need the strength to protect them.
Good. Ahead of you a difficult path there is, Padawan. A Jedi you may yet be.
The ever-present trill inside Finn's mind seized to a vacant lull. Suddenly, Finn extended his hand, eyes still closed, as the force throbbed within the enclosed space. A glint in the distance rang in Finn's ear as it shot towards him. It was in his hand. Finn opened his eyes and looked upon what he had found. The platform beneath Finn's feet began to descend as stone formations parted and revealed the larger structure of the Jedi Temple. As the last pillar parted, the platform descended upon the original central island where Rey stood. Finn stepped off the platform as the structure began to reset itself back into its original configuration, closing off the path behind Finn. Rey smiled. It's... Finn sighed.
Yours.
Rey explained. Finn looked up at Rey and then back at the object. A small shard rested within the palm of his hand. It's a kyber crystal. Finn smiled at Rey.
It's your kyber crystal.
Rey stood up and placed a small parcel of tanned leather on the lectern and had spread out Finn's lightsaber parts onto it.
Complete it, Finn.
Finn stood up and walked up to the lectern, solemnly cradling the crystal as if it were a newborn. The shard began to hover from his palm, and with his other hand he began fashioning the pommel casing. With the shard floating and suspended in the air, Finn took his right hand and positioned the pommel casing. With his left hand, he guided the emitter matrix into place and equipped a coupling, then proceeded to attach the emitter matrix to the hilt assembly. Carefully, he inserted the kyber crystal into the core and replaced the cover of the hilt. He finally threaded the bottom pommel casing to the bottom of the hilt. Witnessing Finn construct his lightsaber in a way that she had not, Rey was in awe at the beauty of its fabrication. It took her back to her days on Ajan Kloss, where her lightsaber work was reminiscent of her days on Jakku, taking scraps and scavenged parts and improvising. Finn's construction was more akin to the stories in the scriptures. She felt envious at that moment. Finally, Finn fit the focusing ring into the main hilt and attached the blade emitter. The connectors were fastened, the screws were in place. He was ready to ignite the lightsaber he had fabricated from parts he asked Rey to scavenge from the TIE fighter he had escaped the clutches of the First Order in with Poe. It was a tricky endeavor, as it had already been scrapped by Tito and other scavengers. Finn ignited it. It glowed a pristine white upon activation as the crystal was attuning itself to Finn. "Quick, Rey. How do I get it to gold like yours?" Finn smiled gleefully at his first ignition.
That's not how it works, Finn. Just give it time.
Rey responded like a proud sister who had witnessed her brother graduate. The lightsaber glowed a brilliant white and began to flicker in Finn's hand as if it were losing power. "What's going on?" Finn panicked.
Patience.
Rey put her hand on Finn's shoulder. Suddenly, the oscillating nature of Finn's lightsaber glow began to stabilize. As it grew steady, the glow shifted.
How quaint.
Rey remarked sarcastically. "Woo," Finn smiled.
It looked good on you back on Starkiller, and it still does.
Finn deactivated his lightsaber and hugged Rey. Tears ran down Rey's cheek.
I knew you could do it.
"Thanks." Finn felt relieved. The moment was brief. Rey kicked Finn to the ground and ignited her lightsaber. Finn was startled at first, then glanced at Rey. She wore a smile on her face, and he knew. He got up and ignited his lightsaber as they began their first sparring lesson. Rey's lightsaber skills had been refined over the years. Finn, having to settle for practicing with Rey's lightsaber all this time, finally felt free. The feedback and clash of the lightsabers felt new, exhilarating. He was at peace with the Force inside the cave at last. The duel was free-flowing, free of ill intent. As their lightsabers clashed repeatedly, the Lothwolf at the far end of the corridor spectated temporarily and then bolted.